We are back, and the AFC North teams have all wrapped up their games for this week, with the Browns and Steelers doing that on Thursday, and the Bengals and Ravens both having 1 p.m. games. All those are wrapped up, and we can now dive into some of the results. We're going to start from the top down. In first place of the AFC North after week 3 is the Cleveland Browns. They are in first place via their divisional record. They are 1-0 against the division. The Ravens are also 2-1, but they have not played a divisional game yet. They haven't played a game against another AFC North opponent, and they won't do so until, I think, week 5 against the Bengals. So we'll see how that goes. But for now, in first place is Cleveland Browns. They did beat the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday. I did make a video about that for my initial reaction to it, for more of the Browns perspective. But so far, the TLDR of that is that the offense played much better than I think I would have expected throughout the first 3 weeks in general, especially against Pittsburgh. The defense did enough in order to beat a really bad Steelers offense led by a bad quarterback in Mitch Trubisky, at least a bad starting quarterback, but I'll get into that later when I talk about the Steelers and how they fared in their upcoming weeks. But as far as the Browns goes, I'm really impressed with Jacoby Brissett's chemistry with both Amari Cooper and David Njoku, who they are expecting to play a big role. Obviously, the running game and the offensive line has been elite. It's just a matter of, is the defense actually improved, or do they just benefit from having a pretty bad offense to go against after their disastrous meltdown against the Jets last Sunday? They play their next game on the road in Atlanta. This week, the Browns were the only team to play a home game. Next week, they'll be the only team to play an away game. Although, again, the Falcons, not exactly a premier opponent. The Browns have a pretty easy early schedule, especially if you think the Patriots are bad. Then 5 of their first 6 games are definitely very winnable, even with their backup quarterback in at the roster. Moving on to second place, also with a 2-1 record, the Baltimore Ravens. They get a win today over the New England Patriots. The game was pretty competitive throughout the first half. At one point in the third quarter, they trailed 20-14, but after that point, the Ravens essentially took over the game. They scored, I think, 17 unanswered, and the Patriots tried to mount a comeback, but turnovers forced by both the Ravens defense and some reckless play from Mac Jones kept that from happening. Lamar Jackson is having a very, very good early season, an MVP caliber early season for Lamar Jackson so far. As far as the wide receiving core goes, yeah, it's pretty bad, but when you have a guy like Mark Andrews on your roster, maybe you don't need a signature wide receiver one when you have a guy like Mark Andrews, who is going to be both a tight end and fill that role of being a constant receiving threat for the Ravens. The defense was opportunistic this week, but again, Mac Jones had a pretty rough fourth quarter, trying to make some plays happen, and the gunslinger role didn't work out for him too well this game. But we'll see how that works out next week when they play at home against Buffalo. Definitely a tough matchup for a Buffalo team that's going to be looking for a bounce back after a loss to the Miami Dolphins this week. So we're going to move on to the 1-2 Pittsburgh Steelers. Like I said, they lost to Cleveland on Thursday. They are ahead of the Bengals via their divisional record, and also they played the Bengals and they beat the Bengals. So they're ahead of the Bengals in the divisional standings, but both of those teams are 1-2. I think the main thing for the Steelers team is getting TJ Watt back, to be quite honest. He still has at least 2 weeks of IR left, so he has to miss those games. But there are some reports that this team is a little optimistic that he could be back as soon as that IR period ends. Again, the sooner he gets back, the better for Pittsburgh, because he does make this Pittsburgh defense a game breaker. He does transform them from a defense that's pretty good to a defense that is an active threat and can turn a game on a dime. I do think he is that much of a difference maker for Pittsburgh, because honestly, this offense is anemic. Mike Tomlin was asked if they're going to consider a change to Kenny Pickett at quarterback, which I think is needed, but Mike Tomlin has said that there's been no talks about that. They're not going to. Week 4, it's still going to be Mitch Trubisky, which, I mean, that's fine. But when do you make that change? When does it go from Mitch Trubisky to Kenny Pickett, if not now in this long break? Is it at the bye week? Because the Steelers still have 5 more games until their bye week. And if Mitch Trubisky doesn't improve and the offense doesn't do anything, and it's halfway through the season and the Pittsburgh Steelers are still floundering around the basement of this division, then 8 games might be enough for this to be a lost season for the Steelers if they don't kick it into gear with Kenny Pickett in, and it's not suddenly they're not winning every game with Kenny Pickett in as quarterback. This could be a bit of an issue if they don't make that change as quick as they should. But that being said, their next game is at home against the Jets, who the Steelers might be bad, but you would think that they should beat the New York Jets in their next game in Week 4. Speaking of the Jets, the Bengals getting their first win against the New York Jets today. Unlike the previous 2 games, the Bengals managed to get out on a hot start. They managed to avoid a slow start. They managed to avoid, letting the other team get a little opportunistic and smell some blood in the water. And I think that's what happened with the Cowboys last week is that, yes, the Cowboys, especially without Dak Prescott, are probably a worse team than the Bengals, but the Bengals gave Dallas momentum. They gave them an opportunity to grab that game, and the Cowboys did, led by Cooper Rush, who had a decent game. Wasn't great or anything, but he wasn't bad. He made the plays that you have to make in the NFL. And this time the Bengals avoided that. They got out to a nice lead against the Jets, and they really held it there. The Bengals defense held the Jets out of the end zone for the entire game, something that I wish the Browns could have done last Sunday, but whatever. But I'm not going to move on from that loss for a while. That's going to haunt my brain for probably the rest of the regular season at least. The offensive line wasn't perfect in this game, but they only allowed 2 sacks on Joe Burrow, and that is an improvement for this offensive line. However, there are still plays where Joe Burrow doesn't get sacked, but he is forced out of the pocket due to some pressure. But Joe Burrow does have that mobility to his game. He's not exactly a running kind of quarterback, but he is able to move out of the pocket, extend the play with his feet, and make a throw on the run. The Bengals play their next game at home against the Miami Dolphins on Thursday, so they have a very quick turnaround against the Miami Dolphins team who is red hot. They just beat the Bills in a pretty big upset, even though the Dolphins, they did get better. They got Tyreek Hill. There's a lot of offseason hype about them. Getting that win over Buffalo is still a pretty big deal for them. So thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, please feel free to leave a like and a subscribe if you enjoy the video and you would like to see more like it. Thank you all again for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about the AFC North and how their week fared out in the comments below. And I will see you at the next one.